I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is going to be our first of which will probably be many quarterly presentations on different parts of Revit. We're going to try and keep these to really small portions to allow time for Q&A and things like that. So today I'm going to go over views, and actually when I was going through my list and everything else, this might actually turn into a two-parter. Just finding out how much stuff I have and trying to fit it on 40 minutes without being overload is a little much. So it may end up going over and going on to the next session. So just be aware of that. Part of the goal of this session is to kind of go over how Revit works, especially with views. I'm going to be pointing out some things that I've been seeing and some workflows that if you follow these, you might actually be able to make your job a little bit easier, make things a little less complicated, and actually can help you a little bit with your problem solving on your own without the need for BIM to be involved. So we're going to start off with the view hierarchy. With any complicated software, there's a sequence of events. Something was programmed to happen before something else does. And the same thing happens with Revit. For what we have on the screen now is the visibility override hierarchy, where the settings come from and what it supersedes. So the baseline, starting at the bottom, this is your foundation. Number 9, everything above it will supersede what's below. So this is your main settings across the board for project object styles. What supersedes that is actually your visibility graphics. This is view specific. This is when you hit VV or VG and you see the dialog box for, changing line weights, colors, thicknesses, and patterns and stuff like that for the specific view. That would be, when I hit VV, that would be this dialog here, visibility graphics. So this is the lowest form of overrides that you can have. And then you kind of build upon that where you can make changes. The next one is actually what's what they call override. In the VG graphics, there's a cut line styles. This isn't something that's typically seen in the engineering side, but if you had certain categories, you could actually set the cut styles for internal to them. For instance, I have duct accessories highlighted right now. Doesn't really matter here because what it is usually these are related to your walls, floors, and ceilings. I think are the only things that it affects. It's the internal lines inside of it and the patterns and line weights associated with it. This has a little bit of overriding factors of what your base and regular object styles are covering. Now, building upon that, what kind of comes next in that grouping is duct and pipe system overrides. So whenever the piping or ductwork designers are placing their duct and pipe, they can apply a system to it. Each system has an associated color for it. So when that's being brought in, that's what you're going to see on screen, especially across models when you're having the MEP models brought into an architecture model. Architecture prints in color, but they really want to see everything black and white. So this will supersede any visibility graphics stuff. So you go in your VV, VG, they will still remain. However, what supersedes those are stuff related to phasing. So if it's existing, your graphic overrides for existing will supersede the colors on the systems. Information's still there, colors change it. But in order to do what I mentioned earlier about with the duct and piping across the model, is that you need to go above that and actually apply filters. View filters will supersede the colors on the duct and pipe. And I'll kind of come back to this a little bit more when I go over filters, but these have the ability to basically ignore what you do for system settings and apply your own colors on top of it. That would be in your visibility graphics, that's this tab. So anything that's here would supersede the settings for like those styles. Now, taking that even a step farther is the filters is one thing. You see that list, but even inside filters, there's even a hierarchy here. There's an order of operations. So whatever's at top is actually what happens first and then goes downstream from that. So if I turn around and turned everything in the model red, and then I turn around and had doors colored green, the doors would show green, everything else would be red because this happens second. So this hierarchy will kind of influences what will happen in the view for your model. Now, adding to that, the next one is you override by elements. You really, there's enough stuff here to happen before this that you want to try to avoid the override graphics, because A, it's harder to find the problems when you put something in the wrong setting, coming through and doing it, and it's not something that you can easily just apply in bulk. You have to manually select each one and apply them. And if you make a mistake, you have to fix your mistake multiple times. So you try and avoid the override graphics as much as possible, but that is the next one. And then the top of this pyramid, and one doesn't really supersede the other, is paint and line work. Now, paint is the feature that is found on the Modify tab, and you can apply a paint on a surface of an element. Paint's typically used on the architecture side, but allows you to apply that. And why it affects graphics is because those materials that you're painting on may have an embedded pattern. And this has been a problem. This has been a problem a few times on jobs with ceilings. Someone has decided to use paint on a ceiling, and now your graphics are overridden from the material of the ceiling itself. We get the wrong pattern on there. It's doing the wrong thing, and now trying to figure out what's going on. And then along with that, and the last one in this group, and like I said, these guys really could be at the same level, is line work. They're really at the same level because they can impact your visibility graphics in a different way. The paint is for surfaces and applying like patterns, things like that, material-based stuff. Line work is overriding a line, an edge on a component, an element that with a certain pattern. So if you wanted to show something that's showing solid, which would have the line come up as a hidden line, that's what line works for. Keyboard shortcut LW. The paint is PT. And what that is if I were to come in here, I type LW, or I can click on this command here, and it's going to go by category. So whatever the category and object style is saying is what it's going to apply. But if I wanted to, I could make it have, where is it at? I'll use hidden line because this one shouldn't have a problem with this. There we go. So in this case, there's multiple lines on top of each other, so I started hiding them. So now I could have one whole side of a wall not show, or magically make it disappear. You see, I had to click. I don't know if you can tell, but I had to click a couple times for that to happen on the wall. But these type of line work features can be overridden for other parts. This order of operations so much in the software can impact how you work and what you can do with them, and why certain things don't work, why object style doesn't work because of the duct and pipe systems, so on, things like that. So it seemed like I was jumping all over the place with what I was talking about in that first part. We're going to build upon that, and we're just going to build it in different areas. So one of the first things we're going to kind of talk about is part of the graphics for the view and setting specific to it. Now, for instance, let me undo this. Every view has a discipline assigned to it. You've got multiple options in here. And right now, by the way, I'm actually using an old job we did. I brought this into a newer template, but an old job we did, and I'm basically using a template based on architecture. For the purposes of this, I can explain still a lot of it. I'm just not going to bounce back between the two different styles of templates. But architectural is one of them, structural, which is something we probably will not use. And then we got ones for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, as well as coordination. Looking at it on paper, you would think that they're just text values, nothing more. But each one of these settings has a graphical representation and impact on your view when you change it. For instance, each one of them, just before I start, each one of these this view I'm looking at has a view range set at the bottom of 0, top at 11, and a cut plane at 4. So basically waist height, right through your doors. So when I'm applying this, the disciplines have great influence on how your documentation sets up. So in this view range, and this is right now in general, in a floor plan between cut plane and bottom, the 0 to 4 feet, that is the general range of any architectural elements that are going to show up in this view. I'd move it up to 5. I will only see between cut plane and bottom for architectural elements. So that's walls, doors, specialty equipment, generic models, kitchen equipment, medical equipment, so on and so forth. That is the only thing you're ever going to see. And that doesn't matter what discipline we're talking about. Coordination, structural, MEP, all of them have that setting. That's the only amount of work you're going to see for architectural-based elements. For a view that's set purely to architecture, that is all you're ever going to see, that view range. So we would, we want the doors to show as a cut open, and there's the graphics that it's going to apply to it. But we want to see, maybe we want to see things above that for other disciplines. Architecture is not your realm. So what you'd want to do is, if you want to see higher, you might want to turn around and change it from architecture to coordination. Coordination has most of the same graphical settings. Architectural elements are only going to be seen in that same range. But when you set the coordination, it no longer ignores the top, and I can start seeing additional elements all the way in the view range between my bottom and my top. So that's why this pipe showed up. And which is especially important is if you had fire alarm devices turned on. This is important. This is how you get your fire alarm devices, which typically, based on code, the glass for a horn and strobe is actually supposed to be 80 to 90 inches above the floor. So, that's higher than most of your doors. So your cut plane, if you try modifying a cut plane to come this high based on your architecture settings, you're going to have your doors mess up. So it's very important that you understand this. So this is set to 6'8", so that's like right up there, right at the top of the door. Now, this would show up here, but I don't need to go the full range that this view set up. This view is set up to, this view range is set up here to 11. 11 is great for the engineering side, but on the architecture side, 11 is just overkill because it would be seeing more stuff than you'd ever want to see. So you'd probably want to come down here and just change this to, say, a 9 foot. By 9 foot, I'd be able to get all the graphics. No, wait, can't do that. These are actually at 9 foot, so let's say 8'8", or 8 foot. I'd say 8 foot just for my purpose. 8 foot. The piping I had just drew would not be showing in view, but I'd have all the stuff I need to, everything above the cut plane. So this is how you can get around some of the life safety type drawings or things like that. You need to see higher stuff or see wall mounted light fixtures, exit signs, those things, without sacrificing the quality of how your view is going to be set. If I were to set this high enough, if I were to set this view range here, set it to like 7 feet and set this up to like this and have it set for architecture. Well, actually, you might clear it. Sometimes it always depends on what you have, but sometimes if doors are a little lower, I've gotten problems with some of these things. Same thing with exit signs. Exit signs would actually be even higher than this, so those would be another problem with these. So just be aware of these type of problems. Generally, I would start seeing the jam showing above the top. Now, on the same proportions, there's 3 big ones that we're going to show here that are mainly for the engineering side, and they have a different set of graphics. They're like coordination, they show from top to bottom, but unlike coordination architecture, the categories that designated as architectural elements, your walls, doors, generic models, the things I mentioned earlier, they will automatically be half-toned. So these will automatically, just by changing this, I can automatically have everything half-toned here. I don't have to go into my settings and make any type of changes. This is a single setting across the model. Every time you apply that graphic to the view, I'll switch it to electrical, switch it to plumbing. It made a change, and plumbing, same idea. Or not coordination. Plumbing, I get the same type of graphics. These graphics influence how things are going to look, and you don't have to sit there and worry about which category does it. I will tell you this covers for most things, but as you can see down here, because plumbing fixtures are not as a single line version of it. They might have some might be you want half toned, some you might not. So plumbing fixtures aren't by default half toned in the views. All right, so now building upon that, and I think we talked a little bit about view range. One of the other things that comes along with this view range problem that I see, like on the architecture side, where if they don't set the coordination, one of the things that there is available, but I do recommend you use them very sparingly, is the plan region. So one of the things that I do say to use sparingly as far as this is the plan region. So what you could do is you have a way of creating an autonomous view range for your view that does not impact anything else. It's under the plan views, and you can just plan region, and you draw whatever shape you want. Just draw a nice rectangle here. And in this case, I could set this so the view range would actually show at, so even with this, it's set at 8 feet, cut it to 4, but because the view is set to architectural, it's still not going to reference the between the cut and top. So if I were to set this to 7 foot at this location, I'd be able to get that in here. Oh wait, did I turn off fire alarm devices? No. Even with these. There we go. Okay, it wasn't far enough. So even with these, they could be doing this. I've worked with architects who've done this in the past, but it might be great for finding this little item that you need to do rather than deal with the coordination. But what ends up happening is these things move a little bit, especially across models, because they decided that's the right location for it. You're going to come back later and like, what's going on? And most of the time, people don't remember they put these in. I worked on a job before where there were about 30 of these small ones like this all across the floor plan because they were trying to find all these horn strobes. This and we ended up spending about an hour trying to figure out what was going on before we realized we just wiped it out and changed the setting to coordination and resolved the problem itself. Because what's good, it might be nice to fix this now, but people tend to never remember they put them in here. So now you have to try and find them again and fix the problems. It ends up becoming more work to troubleshoot to find them than to do the more efficient way in the first place. The other thing about plan regions is that when you do set plan regions in, and I'll put it right here. Let's say I set this up to say 12 feet. And I'm going to set this to, let's say it's 8 feet, and I'm going to set this to the engineering side. So technically the view range should not be seeing piping. I'm going to set this to mechanical. So although the plan region was only this small area there, anything that goes through this will automatically start showing up above this. So you got to realize that with plan regions, if you had a certain intent you're trying to show, you may get more above and beyond where you're going to need to go, and then it can start causing other problems. And you might have to start making this with changing this boundary so that it comes over here like this, so that you get the setting you need to. And you start making odd shapes. So kind of think about what you're trying to do when you're doing these, because it comes harder and harder to try and identify and fix your problems. We got pulled into a project about 2 months ago where it was a little bit easier going back and removing all the plan regions and starting from scratch on a view than to try and understand what they were trying to do originally and fixing them, because there was multiples in a view. And the thing also about plan regions, you can't put a plan region inside another plan region. Revit doesn't like that. So let's kind of go back to our overrides. So for instance, right here, as I was talking about before, we had the visibility graphics. They're superseded by over your object styles. And then we come up here, we got the graphics for phasing, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. But we have view filters. View filters are a great way to do something, and there's a couple different ways you can do this. So for instance, all right, so there's 2 ways to do filters. Filters are a way to take a set of elements in a model and apply a graphical change. It could be turning things off, like for instance, maybe I want to turn off these card readers, or it could be applying a different color, like the piping that I have here in an architectural view. They'd want to make sure those are black. There are different ways you can do this. One way you can do is you can modify them by using a logic-based system. So if I wanted to, I can come to the View tab and come to Filters, or when I go into Visibility Graphics, I can come into them. I can come into Filters here, and there's an Edit New Filter. Either one of those gives us the same dialog box. There's many ways to get to the same thing in Revit. So this is our view filter dialog box, and you'll see there's a long list here, and I'll kind of go over a little bit of this as well. So the view filter dialog box, when you've got to create your new filter, first thing you do is obviously you make your new one, and like I said, I'll explain the existing ones. I'll call this filter one for now. And what you have to do is you'd have to start with that, and you have to always work from big to small. So big would be, what categories do I care about? So if, in this case, maybe I only want to do stuff for ducts or pipes or something of that nature. I'll do pipes. That's what's on the screen. So I will click the pipes here. And then I have to break it down to a smaller. What it breaks down is there's an or statements or and statements, and you can have a bunch of rules that apply to it. So in this case, I have all these categories. So it's going to do everything that's in this category selection here and start whittling it down to basically, if I wanted to, everything that's on phase created equals new construction. I could have that apply. And then I could create this and I could add it. And I called it was called filter one. The graphics wise, I can choose anything I want to do. I can make it bright pink and dashed. If it's available, I might be able to apply a cut pattern to it. Or I could just turn it off in general. In this case, I'm going to try and do an override of, we'll do dots and we'll make it pink. That's not going to, yep. So by creating this, I can hit OK. I got a nice dash, but now I have the graphic overrides that I was talking about. That before I did that, I would not have been able to, I wouldn't be able to go to visibility graphics and change. Pipes. See, this is an example of that hierarchy coming into play. So that filter actually can be made available for whatever you want to do. And I think I might have undid it. But anyway, so these filters are available. You can make many things you want to do. The other side of it is that you could also make what's called a selection filter. In this case, I'm going to tab through and select everything here. This is a selection. Once you actually make this happen, you can save it. You'll notice here when I had these selected, this portion, after more than one element, this is the selection set. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to call it my selection. So the same way as before, when I go to my visibility graphics, I have another option in filters. Instead of all these ones that are rule based, the intelligent ones that will think ahead as far as things are going to happen. Like if I want to get rid of these card readers, I can go through and hide them over and over again. My selection is a selection filter, so it's only whatever I choose to put into it, and it can really be anything. I could be a couple pipes. If I had a blow up of a room that I was going to do a couple different, or I had a room that I was going to do blow ups on, in the main view, I might want to hide all the stuff, but then so that I can then show it only in the other in the blow up call outers, things like that. So I can apply that my selection, and I can do the same thing as before. And make this, and make it red. So I got the same results, but this one is limited to only these pipes. No intelligence here, nothing to plan for any future pipes or anything that's going to be there. So there's certain ways we can work with this to kind of help you go along with it. But in our template, we've kind of gone through and set up some things to just, I don't need you making these every time. On the filters, when you hit add, you'll see some filters for the mechanical. These are mechanical equipment. These filters here are based on equipment standards from mechanical. The AHU is their standard designation on our tag is AHU and a number below it. So any family that has that, you can apply the settings across the board. If you want to hide them, maybe things like TUEs and TUSs. These are terminal air units. These are units that are in a ceiling. Maybe you don't want to see them, but you want to see other parts like fan coil units or things like that. We can apply these to the view and then just have the visibility turned off, and you automatically, the work's already done. Provided these are not outside the realm of standard Genesis projects, we can just add this and then have them automatically not show. And this will plan for every future one. Or you might want something with a thinner line weight, but that's because it's just so congested, and it's all of them are just chillers. So you might want to come in here and just apply the line weight for chillers. Chillers up here. So it's just different things that are available to you. It's available both in the Arch and the MEP templates. Now for the architects to to fix this color system, because they need all their stuff in black and white, there is a filter directly in here specifically for this. Override system colors. So as soon as I do that and I apply black, when applied, this will go through the model and go to every pipe fitting, and so on, every duct fitting, so on, mechanical equipment, and air terminals to make sure they're all set to black. So on architectural drawings, you don't have to worry about trying to manually override each element. So any view you need to use, just apply this. This covers across the board. Anything that system will apply to, this definitely will override that. We do not have them set on because of there hasn't been a great designation of what views need to require this. They're not assigned to every view, but it is available and can be made available to any part of the model when needed. Ambrose, do we have any questions coming in for this, or has it been quiet?
We do have one.
Okay.
Jeffrey Zhu asked, if you delete elements that were part of the selection filter, will the filter still apply to the remaining elements, or will that mess the whole thing up?
From everything I've seen, and let's verify it. So I'm going to undo this. I'm going to put these all on here. We'll just call one here. We'll just create a new one. Okay, XXX. Put my filter in. It should work, but I just want to, I don't like to say anything incorrect. So I'll apply my XXX. And I will make it yellow. So everything is yellow here. Now, if I were to go and start deleting, has no impact on everything else that's there. Generally, as far as Revit's concerned, this is basic software. It's just a list of elements. You have to go out of your way to add stuff, but it's not going to just blow up because you took one element away from that list. If in this case, something like this were to happen, and let's use it from an architectural perspective, you put all these things in here and you put a door in here. But the door wasn't part of the set. The door is not going to automatically be consumed by it because everything else around it was. Same thing if you turn around and redid your pipe fittings or elbows, because they're considered new elements when you do that. But they won't take away from the list of elements that you did do. Anything else?
That was the only question.
Okay.
Yeah, she said, we'll answer my question. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I think we're going to go for one more thing, and then I think we're going to call it for this presentation. Okay, so this one's kind of seemed like it's going to go off on a little bit of tangent, but it's actually it's a big thing that I see, and I want to kind of bring it to a lot of people's attention. I've tried not to push anything, point fingers at any for disciplines or a lot of stuff, but this one actually kind of has a workflow that really does lean towards one discipline more than anything else, but it has a direct impact on almost every other discipline, and it's actually about grids. And although grids are not a view thing, everything else related to them, it directly correlates to views. So there's a few things about this. So first off, one of the first things that I do see a lot of at times where we have grid lines, double grids coming up, and instead of people talking to each other about work sets and things like that, making sure people will go and start hiding them in here. For instance, I only have a few grids on this side. The rest of these are actually from the structural model. And in this case, I did this on purpose because the model wasn't, I didn't unload these work sets. But typically when we set up a model, we want to set these models up so all our levels and grids are on a shared levels and grid work set. We want to do this so that each model can have those work sets unloaded. So in this case, I'm going to structurally, I'm going to go across the model and I'm going to manage work sets. It's going to take a second, but these are all the work sets that are in that model. And I'm going to close the shared levels grid work set. I know seems a little bit of a tangent for views, but it does have a correlation because by unloading it, now I don't have double grids everywhere. So what's really important and what I see a lot of is that people are actually, instead of when we have this one grid line that isn't on the right work set in somebody else's model, instead of reaching out to a person that's working in that project to just, hey, can you go run the SLG command, this button here, and sync, and then I'll reload, and the problem's solved in every view, they will go and they will actually start hiding it in every view that's in there. So the whole talking to someone syncing can take a whole 5 minutes of time. But if it's showing up across the model, they're going through every view, and that could actually add up to a couple hours worth of work if it's a lot of grid lines. So communicate a little more with people that are working the other models instead of going through and hiding these things. So, and this is not any specific discipline, but this is just a generality because I'm seeing it in every discipline. But reach out to the other models when you're seeing this problem. They can sync, they can reload, everybody can do this really fast, and you can have this problem resolved across the entire model. By me unloading like that, none of the views have that double grid line problem anymore, just from that simple unload. So be a little more diligent in just communication, and you can do a lot less work. Now, the other part, and this one is the one that I was kind of mentioning before about trying to avoid discipline-specific things. The other part about this grid line is when you're drawing your grids. This one's specifically more towards architecture because typically in a project, either the MEP models are being copy modeled from architecture or structural grids, structural models. It's one or the other. But think about what you're doing when you're drawing your grids, why you're drawing them. When you're drawing the grid in Revit, Revit is set up for first point and second point, which end has the grid head. So in our setup, it's first point. So if I draw every model vertically top to bottom, I can have my grid heads at the top. I don't have to sit there and check and uncheck each end. But if I don't do this, what I'll get is something like this. I saw this in a few projects recently where people are drawing top to bottom. They're saving themselves a little bit of time when they're drawing these top to bottom, and then from when at the bottom they draw it up like this. But now they have to go through each view and fix the grid heads so that they're all the correct way instead. So it's better off to do it right the first time and do this rather than have to go through every view and do it. You know, I see every view I'm going to go in here. It's not that many in here, but every view has that same problem. So it's a repetitive problem. It's not very helpful. Now, adding on to that, when we are going to set up the mechanical views or an MEP model, I'm going to do model. I'm going to link this guy in. When I link this in and I do a copy monitor, it's going to be replicated the exact same way across there. So not only is it going to be more work for you, but also you and anybody else working in your model, but it also starts becoming a thing across models to everybody else in our setups. And I try and do it on my side to make sure we eliminate that as much as possible. And I know that there's no perfect system. Not every job's going to, but if it doesn't work on any view, it's definitely not a perfect system. It's not a working system. So insert. Okay, there we go. So when I start copy monitoring them, right. So now that same problem is now replicated in the models I'm linking them into. There is one way to fix this type of problem where the grid heads are not consistent, graphics are not aligned. It's called propagate extents. Propagate extents allows you to pick elements in a 2D variation of them. I don't care about you. Pick your views so that they can look nice. In this case, I'm going to have them all line up with each other. This side's going to be switched, all of these here. Have them all lined. I'm going to uncheck this side. Let's say I did it perfectly. So all these grid heads, I want to make sure are applied everywhere. So that's where propagate extents comes in. It allows you to take these extents on a view that looks good and you can apply them to other places. So I'm going to click the propagate extents tab and you're going to have options for multiple views that are here. If you're using propagate extents, it's going to be different per scale. These were tight here, but if this was at quarter scale, these heads would be smaller, so it wouldn't be as problematic for them. So maybe what would happen is we might not need to worry about these at quarter scale or worry about them differently at quarter scale. So that's where they have this option here. But I can choose which views I want to apply them to. And then when I do that, it will go across and apply that crop to every view. So you see here, everything else here looks a lot nicer now. All of them are coming off the same exact way. I didn't have to sit here and manually add this elbow each time. The bad thing about propagate extents is this only works when views are not cropped, either the source or the destination. Once these are cropped, that feature doesn't work. So if these type of problems, you introduce a grid line after you've already cropped your views, because we know it happens. If you don't try and fix these type of features before you start cropping your view, there is no easy button, and it becomes manual for every view. So this is another thing to kind of think about with your graphics, about how you're going to do these things. Once cropping happens, let's say I wanted to change this and bring it over here, and I check this crop box. I don't do anything else but crop the view. The moment I do that, propagate extents. Okay, now it's lying to me. It's actually gotten better at this, because it used to not allow you to do that. Maybe it's because it's 3D extents. I'll have to look at that one. But you have to be very careful with propagate extents because it does not always work. And general rules from Autodesk is that it's not supposed to work if cropping. But the reason why this might have is because I didn't actually change the 3D extents of this thing. That might be the only reason why this went through. I'm going as far as I'm going to during this time frame. If you have any questions, if you'd like to find out more, just let BIM know, and we'll gladly go over it with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Will.